This week, I want to further unpack the notion of privilege. Last week, we looked at the privilege of ignorance. If it doesn't concern me, I don't need to deal with it. I don't need to be involved. Today, I want to deal with something a little bit more specific, because one of the common themes that I heard during the referendum was that for many people, this wasn't so much about what Indigenous people want, but it was a lack of trust in the politicians. Now, I understand that there can be really many reasons why people do not trust politicians, and I'm certainly not going to get into any side of politics or any political ideology here. But what we see here when people say I'm disengaging from the conversation, from the arguments, because I don't trust some of the people who are putting some of the arguments up in front of me. What this shows is that I have a privilege to disengage that other people do not. If you had been an Indigenous person in Australia during the time of the referendum, and you believed, as 80% of the Indigenous people did, that this was a worthwhile step, not a perfect step, but a worthwhile step, you had to trust the politicians that they would do what they'd said they would do and that they would act on your best interests. And we all know that governments have not always dealt well with Indigenous people here in Australia, and I know they've not dealt well with Indigenous people in other countries. And so Indigenous peoples often have really good reasons why not to trust politicians. But here in Australia, in the referendum, 80% of them did. For those of us who are non-Indigenous, to then say, well, I don't trust politicians, therefore I'm not going to vote for what they wanted us to. I'm not going to listen to what they're saying. That is a privilege that we have, which is not afforded to the people for whom the referendum was important, for whom the referendum had real impact. One of the things that those of us who have privilege must be very careful of is how we use our privilege. I have privilege as a white woman, a baby boomer, born into a particular generation that had a particular worldview. Many of us have stayed stuck in that worldview. A lot of people like me just continue to grow and mature and change, which is a fantastic thing because that's what we get to do in our lives. But regardless of where our mindset sits, having a certain privilege because of where we sit in society means that we also have a responsibility. So even if we did not trust the leaders that were presenting a particular idea to us, because of our privilege, we had the responsibility to find out for ourselves, to do a bit of digging, and to then make an informed and educated opinion. In your workplace, are there people who have a privilege of position, a role, of rank, and they use that position wisely and that privilege well? Fantastic. I'm sure your organisation is humming along beautifully. But I know that there are some organisations in which those people who do have privilege do not use it for the best, for the common good in a sense, and there's changes that needed to be made. If you find that you're in a position where there is privilege in your team, in your workplace that needs to be addressed so that it can be used positively rather than dragging people down, please contact me. I've put a link in the comments. Come and have a 20-minute chat with me because I've got some strategies that you can put in place in your workplace to deal with privilege, to manage change, and to navigate any conflicts that are happening as people look at perspectives from different angles, from different viewpoints. Come chat with me.